Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the Rangers Review morning briefing for Friday, the 28th of October. I'm Derek Clark, back in Blighty, but only just more on that later. And I'm joined by Joshua Barrie. How are we doing, Joshua?
Yeah, probably a bit better than you, Derek. You got in at what, 2, 3 in the morning after setting off from Naples in the previous morning?
Yeah, it was an early one for me. I flew from Napoli to Mallorca yesterday, and then got a flight. My flight was delayed to Liverpool last night. Got in eventually around 1:30 in the morning. Went through security, only to be stopped as I've made my way out the gate. This is after I've had my passport searched by Border Force. I'm not too sure if I looked dodgy or what have you, or based on the fact there was a number of stamps in my passport in recent months, but I was grilled and taken into a little room and had my bag rifled through. So I'm not too sure if any of you have experienced that, folks, but it was quite unnerving, I've got to say. Certainly the last thing you need after a long day travelling back, covering Rangers, and all you want to do is get to your bed. So that was, that delayed things slightly. So got in the back of 2 last night, so a bit bleary-eyed this morning. But back to talk all things Rangers, and looking forward, of course, to what is a huge match against Aberdeen at the weekend. Callan Pioneer, I thought you gave smuggling a bye, Derek. Yeah, I did, but I'm not too sure if it was the Diego Maradona Espresso Cup that I bought on my travels, but yeah, it was a bizarre scene, I've got to say. Very, very weird indeed. Okay, let's talk Rangers, Joshua, because that's why people are tuning in. Aberdeen tomorrow, of course. Rangers need a win, don't they? Because let's be honest, the pressure is mounting on Giovanni van Bronckhorst. The results haven't been the best, particularly in the Champions League. I think he gets a certain leeway with regards to that. However, domestically is where it matters, and you're only good as your last game, and Livingston was nowhere near good enough.
Yeah, spot on, Derek. What we keep saying is that Rangers haven't been the most entertaining all season, but I think at the start of the season, you go back to that PSV game, who obviously beat Arsenal last night. It seems a million miles away now. And I think you could see the process of what they were trying to do, but gradually, I think, as that has dispersed somewhat and the results have also got worse, it's just combined to make this type of situation where Rangers are 4 points behind. That increased by 2 points last weekend against Livingston, which, as you say, was nowhere near good enough. They've twice been booed off in succession, obviously at home to Dundee as well the week before, and things aren't good. I think there's a lack of continuity in the squads at the moment. When you're trying to pick the starting 11 tomorrow, it's pretty difficult to do that in a number of key areas because of how much it's chopped and changed. I think injuries in key areas haven't helped, but the only thing that will appease, I think, the current situation is not only results, Derek, but I think the type of performances that those results suggest that those results will be long-term, which hasn't been the case in recent weeks. So you're intrigued to see how Rangers do. I think it'll be difficult. They've not been brilliant at home. They've rarely blown teams away in the Scottish Premiership. So I'd be surprised, even the 4-0 wins in the last, couple of months, normally it's included a couple of late goals to kind of beef up the scoreline rather than putting the game to bed early on. So I'd be surprised if that was to change in the short term tomorrow. But absolutely, they need something to convince people that Van Bronckhorst is the man to lead them forward and that success is possible come May, because I think at the moment there's not a lot of belief in that. And that obviously can create a bit of a bad atmosphere that you've seen spill over after the last couple of games with those boos.
Yeah, what do you make of this point, Joshua, from Ian Lamb? Hi, Ian. Morning, guys. The team looked lethargic on the pitch and slow. What's happened? It's certainly a concern that's been levelled at them from a number of supporters. They look not as fit as what they did last season. Is it possibly a hangover of last season? Was it a sort of momentous campaign, you've got to say, and also players are being asked to go to the well one too many times? I'm thinking Arfield, Davis and what have you. Leon King's been thrust in by default more than anything else. Giovanni van Bronckhorst said as much. That's why he came off with cramp the other night. What do you put that down to, Joshua?
I agree with the Davies and Arfield point totally. I thought we've made this point before, Derek, but look back to the start of the season when Scott Arfield was coming off the bench. At the end of games, I think twice he came on and scored at Ibrox, or maybe once was an assist. Obviously, did it at Livingston as well. And very quickly, Rangers have fallen into those same patterns of playing these players who can't play 3 games in a row and keep it to the same level at 34 years of age. I just don't think that's the Arfield is. If you think back, what he came to Rangers 5 years ago, age affects every single player, and we've seen last season with Scott Arfield, particularly around the February-March point, how when he was playing too many games, he wasn't able to make a positive impact. Davies is an intriguing one because, I was looking back at that game against Livingston at the weekend, and it's so strange that Davies, who now at 38, 2-3 years ago, he moved to the base of midfield. That seemed to be the twilight of his career, and now you're asking him to make those runs in behind and almost be one of those roaming number 8s. And he scored against Dundee in the Cup. I don't think anyone would question his technical abilities, footballing brain, which can be good, be put to good use when he is given that freedom in the offensive third. But I think then, if your midfield lacks a little bit of pressure when the ball turns over, and I think that this is something that Rangers have struggled with, and it's difficult to look at this in data terms, but you remember under Gerrard, obviously it was a very tight and compact shape, and that meant when Rangers lost the ball, they could attack the opposition and press them together. But also it meant that the centre of the pitch was always quite guarded. You remember in that last title winning season, just how good Stephen Davies was at helping retain pressure on the opposition. And I think something that Rangers have struggled to do is, and this has been a factor, I don't know if other people have noticed this has been a factor for me in a lot of home games this season, going back to the St Johnstone game. I think it was 4-0 on that day as well. But St Johnstone should have taken the lead on that day through their big striker. I can't remember what his name is. It's been too easy for teams to get up the pitch and play through pressure, I think, because Rangers are so high and wide and they maybe don't have that compactness. And then maybe in return to that, I've lacked the legs to kind of keep teams pinned in, which has led to the games being end-to-end, which obviously I think limits your ability to really pressurise them. As I say, as we've seen them do so much under Gerrard in those seasons. So I think that's one of the factors. You also look at players like Lundstrom, who we know has been playing with a knock. Whether that's injury or not, I don't know, because you have to remember in the context of that comment, he was saying players always do that. But certainly I don't think he and Tavernier have been at their best, and they're two of the most important players for Rangers. You've got to remember the loss of Connor Goldson, who I thought the last couple of games before he was injured, St Mirren at home, I thought he had a very good game, coming out and being aggressive as a central defender. So I think a number of factors, absolutely. But under Van Bronckhorst in the league, Rangers have rarely been that intense side who look to blow teams away. It's always been pretty measured and controlled, obviously in contrast to those home European games last season. Obviously, just because of the circumstances, maybe it's being slightly more illuminated than it was last season.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought Tavernier up because I wanted to talk about him. He has given an interview where he says that the players back the manager. James Ellsby says, fed up with the players talking in the papers after defeat, saying we have a strong squad, etc. Do your talking on the park. And Pete Lawrence gets in touch. Hi, Pete. He says it's a cluster of problems on and off the park. I wonder if the players respect Tav at the moment due to poor form. He had it in abundance last season. He's back the manager now. Of course, he's going through to when do you ever get players that don't back the manager at the moment? But he says we're always behind the manager. Never once are we not. We have full belief in his tactics and whatever he puts on out on match day. It is down to us as a team, as players, to go out and put a performance in for him and the fans. There have been a few games where it's not been good enough, and we have accepted that as a team. We can't let that lapse into our game. Against Napoli, we never hid away from it. We went toe-to-toe with them as best we could and tried to play our football and create our chances. As long as we do the minimum and the basics, put the effort in and really go toe-to-toe with opponents, I am sure the fans will take to that. The fans will take to that in the Champions League, Joshua, but there's an expectancy now domestically. Fans expect 3 points, nothing more, nothing less on Saturday. Anything less than 3 points, And he's going to lose a few more supporters who are clinging on to that belief that he can turn things around here. He needs to start winning games. I seen a comment just earlier on says even if he does win, it's the style of football that people are really concerned about. It's off-putting at the moment. There's not a connection there with the fans. Many of them are turning away. As I mentioned the other day there, some supporters are telling me they're leaving at half-time. Is it all about the result on Saturday as opposed to the performance at this moment in time for you?
Well, the thing about the results is if there is a guarantee that this style of play produces results, then I think people will accept that because winning is the most important thing. But when they don't think this style of play will always return results, as has been shown, I think, against Livingston and against Dundee, that was hardly convincing. Motherwell away was hardly convincing. That's 3 games in a row where you look at sides that you'd expect Rangers to dominate, and they haven't done so. And obviously, if not for that late volley by John Lundstrom, then you're talking about a defeat, and maybe it's even a different tone of conversation then. I feel like we're repeating ourselves because it's the same.
Yeah, we are.
It's the same situation. Yeah, there you go. But to repeat the main point that I think is the issue at the moment, we keep saying football is about entertainment. People want to be entertained, but people also want to win. But if people cannot see the process of how a difficult spell will materialize into success, then it's very difficult to buy in at the moment. So you can understand when people watch that game against Dundee at home or Livingston at home or Motherwell away after a year of domestic football under Van Bronckhorst, you can understand that although the manager may say, yes, we're going through a difficult spell and injuries are a factor, that it's hard to buy into that and say, yes, I can really see how this blueprint is going to return the league title in May. And I think you're absolutely spot on, Derek. That's where the frustration comes into it. That's why perhaps certain things are emphasised at the moment, certain frustrations, why there has been booing after the last 2 games. So tomorrow is the exact same situation as it was against Livingston, where Rangers don't only need a result, but they need a performance. And I think what's really important within that is the manager needs to, for me, especially on the right wing, take that as an example. You have Fashion Sakala, plays brilliantly for me against St Mirren, and then is out of the picture. You then have Rabbi Matondo come in, who hasn't convinced really on the right. He comes on at half-time against Livingston after Sakala had also started against Liverpool. And then in midweek there against Napoli, it's Sakala that comes on the right. I just think there needs to be a little bit more continuity in these key positions, because it's even predicting the team tomorrow, it's a difficult one to call. For me, Ridvan Yilmaz needs to play. I thought he was Rangers' best player in midweek. It was a pretty low bar. It's not as if he had a fantastic game, but I thought he had a good game. Should have had that assist from Morelos. You can see what he brings in possession. For me, Borna Barisic, again, watching that Livingston game back, just gives possession up too cheaply. I don't think it's as much of a strength playing deep in the pitch compared to Ridvan. But the midfield tomorrow, who do you play in there? Because there's not an abundance of legs at the moment, particularly with Tom Lawrence out. So, a few big calls for the manager to make tomorrow. But as you say, performance as much as results. If there is a good performance tomorrow, as well as a result, then maybe the mood changes slightly. But I think there's a lot of convincing to be done.
Yeah, I certainly believe so. And Stephen Kirkland says, put Tav on the right wing. Sick of saying it. Tav is a winger. Joshua, your thoughts on that one?
No, I would just say I respectfully disagree.
Okay, we'll move on from that. But it's all about opinions on this
all
show.
About opinions. Quite right.
Yeah.
But I think it's the same argument with Yilmaz on the opposite flank as well. It's, the positions that are able to pick up are because of the positions that they play in. Something that Tavernier I like when he's got a winger ahead of him is he's able to play these type of crosses where the ball's played back to him and he can play a little bit narrower, play closer to goal. I think you will see the benefit of him at times with a slightly changed position. I just don't think he's in a good vein of form like the rest of the team. It's so hard to judge players when collectively who's in a good vein of form at the moment, who's been playing well. Even Cholak in the last couple of games, who seemed immune to stopping scoring, missed a couple of chances against Livingston. So it's not the best collective picture to judge players within at the moment.
Yeah, absolutely. Kenny says Lowry and Yilmaz must start tomorrow. Lowry, of course, on the bench. Joshua in Naples. I think he's a player that we've been banging the drum for a long time now. It was really disappointing to see him suffer that injury, that reckless challenge at Dumbarton as he was making his comeback a number of weeks ago now. But he's slowly been getting back up to speed, and I think that the fans just want to latch on to something positive to change the mood amongst the side at the moment. And Lowry is certainly seems to be that player. We've seen flashes of him last season, of course. Really enjoyed what I've seen of him. His goal at Tynecastle was sublime. If Rangers can get him fit and firing, then the old cliche Joshua like a new signing.
That seems to happen a lot with Rangers these days. I'd be surprised if he starts though, because I think he's only played 45 minutes for the B team, maybe once more, and I expect he was more on the bench for the not the coefficient. What am I trying to say? Homegrown rule.
Yeah.
Away at Napoli, simply because he has not played that much football, having come back from injury. But when he's fit, totally agree. Play him. Need to play him. Yeah, I don't think many people would disagree with that. The only I think this comes into the Morelos and Čolak debate as well, and Lowry, because Rangers use this system off the ball and where it's more man for man. That I think that often comes into the selection who plays kind of in midfield. If you were to play Morelos and Čolak together, one of them is going to have to almost track back as a midfielder. Would you trust Morelos to do that? Don't know. But when Lowry is fit, when he's played a little bit more for the B team, and maybe I guess all injuries are different. Some will allow a player to come back into the fold quicker than others. He's the exact type of player that Rangers need for me. Someone who will try something, but also someone who has creativity. What Lowry does brilliantly is fizz his passes in and take risks and try to play cross-field, and just what Rangers have not had in recent weeks. So would love to see him in there if possible, as soon as possible. Yeah,
lots of comments coming in, folks. I'll try and get to as many as possible. Talking about that right wing position, Joshua. We've talked at length on many shows about how Rangers have really struggled to fill that void. What about this from Al C? He says, start Roofe on the right, start players who can play with back to goal and play on the half-turn, touchline hugging wingers. Isn't working. I think he's got a point there. Giovanni van Bronckhorst was asked whether he would consider playing Kemar Roofe out there, and he did say he has played there before in a slightly different system. Would you like to see him possibly start out there? Is that the option to the problematic right wing area?
I think Rangers have looked better when they've played with two wingers, because I don't think it worked. Van Bronckhorst isn't going to play with his fullbacks high and wide in the way Gerrard did, so you've got to get your width from somewhere. I agree that it's not been working if you look at the numbers, but I'd point to the Sakala performance against St Mirren, which I think we've hardly seen that, because there's been such a lack of continuity. If the manager was to go back and change something else again, you just do wonder what is his preference. Does he know what his strongest team is at the moment if everyone's fit and available? Roofe, I thought, looked very sharp when he came on against was it Dundee in the Cup?
Yes.
But the manager didn't play him there last season when there was a lot of clamour to start him on the right with Morelos in the role that he played under Gerrard. I agree that could work, but again, it's how likely is that because of the type of football that the manager's played, and given the fact that he didn't play him there last season. What about you, Derek? Would you start him tomorrow? I mean, the thing is, you'd be tempted to start players at the moment who bring a bit of freshness, like Yilmaz and Roofe, given that. Well, I mean, what's the argument for keeping players in that have underperformed so much over the last month?
Exactly. Yeah, I would be inclined to start him if he's fit enough. Then why not? Just get him in there. He offers Rangers something a little bit different, like Yilmaz as well. He's a quality player. Just touch wood, Rangers can keep him fit for as long as possible, because we all know his qualities. But as we all know as well, he's very injury prone. So hopefully he can have a sustained run of games, because Rangers need quality players back in the squad. They're certainly missing too many of them at the moment. Some other comments coming in. Gary Fitzpatrick with a comment from left field here. Would it be worth asking Advocat to come in and help Gio for a couple of months? This happened at Feyenoord when Gio was really struggling at first. He might not be interested, but worth a phone call. I think Advocat's retired, if I'm not mistaken, and I'm sure Van Bronckhorst has him on the other end of a line at any point. I'm sure that he'd have been asking for little tidbits of advice, perhaps. I know he did help him out at Feyenoord when he first started out. That was his first job as a manager. I can't see that happening. Dick coming back to Ibrox in any way, shape or form at the moment, Gary. But it's an interesting point that you raise. Stephen Payton says, are we going to see Morelos and Čolak together? I don't think so, Joshua. I know Morelos coming in for a bit of stick the other night. I thought for first half he was chasing lost causes. He won a number of fouls. I was quite satisfied with his performance, I've got to say, until he sort of faded out. And the miss just sums up his season so far. Off it, isn't it? He looks a shadow of the player we all know he can be, that rampaging Buffalo. However, Antonio Čolak comes in for me tomorrow. There's no doubt about it. But can Van Bronckhorst accommodate the both of them? I guess the only position where you could see Morelos would be over in that right-hand side, but I would be more inclined to play Roofe out there, I've got to admit.
If that was to happen, I'd agree with you. I'm just finding an article I'm going to put in the comment section that I wrote on this. If anyone wants to read it, you can subscribe, as it says at the bottom of the screen, for £1 for 2 months. Pretty good value if you ask us, given what the cost of especially papers are these days. You compare that Morelos against Napoli. I don't think he had a terrible game, Derek, by any stretch of the imagination. But you see when he went through on goal, and you compare that to his 2019 run when he was the top scorer in the Europa League for a while, or even last season under Van Bronckhorst. And I guess match fitness will come into that. The fact that he hasn't, as he started successive games this season, I don't know off the top of my head, but he does look a shadow of his former self at the moment. And you know, for Rangers to have players like Kent, Kamara, Morelos now so far off what their highest levels can be, that all comes into this wider conversation of why things haven't been working recently. And I guess when players aren't in a good vein of form, when the team isn't doing well, sometimes those situations probably don't help one another. But Rangers need their big players as well as a better performance as a team. They need their big players to step up. I actually thought, I don't know what you thought about Kent last weekend, but watching the game back, I don't think he did badly. No. For me, I think I agree that I'm not saying that he's had a good season or defending his numbers. The manager himself has come out quite a few times in the press actually and said that Kent needs to up his numbers. But the difficulty is with Kent, you look at how you break down that Livingston block in that game. The only way that Rangers were doing it was getting the ball wide to Kent, asking him to beat two men. And actually, I think his carry success rate, not his dribble success rate, but in terms of how the success rate when he actually carried the ball was pretty high. What do you expect him to always start deep at the touchline, beat three men and score? I think that's unrealistic. Equally, I think in other games, I don't think his performance has been nearly as good as it can be. I'd be interested to see if the manager could try something different with his positioning. We asked him about that maybe a month ago, just over a month ago. But I think it places so much emphasis, especially when the tempo's slow, and I think that's a big factor as well. It's very different for Kent if he's receiving the ball in space and the defence is unorganised compared to the ball going over to him slowly. He receives the ball deep and he has to beat two men. I think he will start tomorrow, but as I say, at times, as much as his form hasn't been good, there also I think is just such a dependence on him to provide something, which he eventually did for Rangers in the last minute or last couple of minutes to put that on a plate for Lundstrom.
Yeah, listen, Rangers have been over-reliant on Alfredo Morelos for years, and Mark Heights does make it an interesting point. People forget what he has done for us. He's been an absolutely unbelievable signing for Rangers. Of that, there is no doubt. However, this season, he's just looked off it. I'm not too sure if that's a conditioning thing, a mental thing. Of course, he's out of contract in the summer. It looks unlikely he's going to extend his stay with Rangers. He can sign a pre-contract with anyone in just over a month, just a couple of months from now as well. So him and Ryan Kent, of course. So the both of them have been out of form for much of the season. We all know about Ryan Kent and a lot of people would like to see a change over in that left wing area as well. Gallant Pioneers rightly points out, for only £1 million paid for Morelos, we've certainly had our money's worth there. There's no doubt about it. But at the moment, Antonio Cholak is the main man for Rangers, and he's been one of the success stories from the last transfer window. He's been sensational for Rangers. This is an interesting one, Joshua, from Positive Vibe. Lovelace would be a good option from the bench, and Robbie Ure as well. I wouldn't be opposed to seeing those two on the bench. I know we've seen Robbie Ure against the Queen of the South. Of course, he scored. Still raw around the edges, but two big lads, these boys. Lovelace, highly rated down at Millwall, has come up here and is predominantly been playing in the B team. Scored a double against Napoli. Great result for Dave McCallum's men in midweek. I wouldn't be opposed to seeing them on the bench, would you?
No, obviously he's still 16, so you don't want to put the weight of Ibrox on him when things aren't going well. But I don't think he's too far away from first team level. I've watched him a fair amount in the B team this season. Obviously, I wasn't over in Naples, so I didn't see the B team game this week. But even in the home leg against Napoli, the home leg against Liverpool for the B team as well, he performed well. So he's obviously come up north with a view of getting into the first team. He's not come up north to play, for a pathway into the first team. And I think he's still 16. He may have turned 17 by the time Rangers have signed him, but may not be too far away. Absolutely, and I'm sure when you're thinking about the striking position in the summer, he is very much in mind with as you say, Morelos out of contract. I don't know, is Roofe out of contract this summer coming up, or the next?
No, the next.
Okay.
Lovelace is still 16. He turns 17 in January, so still a baby. The team then, Joshua, I think there was a comment earlier on saying that you'd pick the same team as Wednesday night. The only change you would make would bring in Antonio Cholak. I would make some other changes, I've got to admit. Scott Wright doesn't start for me. I know what you get with him, but he's flattered to deceive. He didn't really do anything on Wednesday night that would make me think that I would start him on Saturday. I want to see Kemar Roofe out there. I'm going to put my neck on the line. The back four, the big talk is Barisic or Yilmaz.
Come on, Derek, who would you pick? If you had to pick, who would you pick?
Ridvan Yilmaz all day long.
Good man. I thought you were going to disagree with me there.
No,
got to be Ridvan for me. And this, I genuinely don't think that Barisic has been Rangers' worst player this season, or it's.
No, he's been pretty decent. Decent.
I just don't think the role suits him as much as it does Yilmaz. And like teams need to refresh at points, and you've bought a 21-year-old young international player who's exciting. Play him. He looks ready. He was, away against Napoli. It's not a difficult place to go make your fourth or fifth Rangers start. Play him.
Yeah.
There we go.
Yeah, absolutely. I totally agree with that. The midfield then, Joshua. Now, John Lundstrom is another one who, like Tavernier, looks to be carrying injury. He's even said as much in a podcast recently. Again, another pretty poor performance in midweek, but I don't think Rangers... I think he's one of the players that Rangers need to just hope can play their way out of form. I can see him starting alongside him. Can you see James Sands slotting in beside him as we've seen in midweek, or does Stephen Davis, Scott Arfield come back in?
Lundstrom obviously is suspended as well for Tuesday's game, so I think with that in mind, he definitely will start because Rangers need him to in front of King and Davies. Lundstrom actually kind of played more of that Jack role on in midweek where he was making those higher runs. Rangers, I guess, if you're speaking broadly about what Van Bronckhorst wants his midfield to look like, it'll be one sitting, one on the right, making those kind of channel runs, and a player which has been Tillman recently higher on the left. I think Tillman in that position with Yilmaz and Kent could work really well because, as we discussed before, it's more natural for Cholak to move over to the right-hand side. He scored a lot of goals from that position. It means that Kent and the left-back aren't isolated. So I think Tillman on the left side of midfield, Lundstrom in the middle. On the right, it's difficult because if you play Sands, I think Sands plays as holding midfielder and Lundstrom plays higher. Lundstrom can play higher. We've not seen that in a while. Maybe that would work, but does Sands have the necessary ability to break down defences with his passing. But then you look at the type of opponent it's going to be. Aberdeen, who I'm sure will go for it as well. They're in a decent vein of form, having beaten, I think it was Motherwell they beat last weekend. Who else should you go for? Arfield in there. I mean, what else realistically is your option? Stephen Davis. I don't know. I'd be tempted to go maybe more of a 2-1 in midfield, and with Lundstram in stands, Tillman higher, given a bit more freedom, and then push Tavernier and Yilmaz forward as much as possible. For me on the right, it's got to be Sakala, because I think Van Bronckhorst needs to stick with something. Sakala's last league home start was against St Mirren, and I thought he did very well on that day.
Potentially, yeah.
Yeah, Cholak up top, and I think it'll be Kent on the left. Again, it's more a case of who else comes in and is going to do a better job at the moment. Matondo, I think it's still to have a run of games, maybe in his favoured position, but I don't think there's the evidence yet to suggest that that he's a better option tomorrow. Maybe he is. Maybe people would rather change it up, and I totally understand that. But I just think the frequency with which the manager has selected Kent, even when he's been out of form, I don't think he's actually dropped him aside from resting him yet. So I think he'll be out on the left hand side.
Yeah, this is an interesting point from Ali Quinn. Of course, Leon King did come off in midweek. It was due to cramp, but Van Bronckhorst did say he has been playing a lot of games, and that's the reason why he was suffering from cramp after that robust challenge. I've got to say, I loved that 50-50 challenge. He slid in and won the ball. I'm not too sure who the Napoli player was. Was it Elmas or what have you? But
I think it was.
Yeah, it was that's the sort of challenge that gets fans up off their seats, Josh. I really like seeing that. But yeah, listen, I wouldn't be opposed to seeing James Sands slot back there. I think there's much of a muchness between the two of them. Ben Davis, of course, starts on the left-hand side of the defence, and Touchwood, he's another one that you just hope can steer clear of injury, because Rangers do not need another player out injured in that back line. No one knows when John Suter and Phil Hollander are going to be back in contention. Connor Goldson, we hope, will be back soon. He's one player. I think you're certainly seeing how much Rangers miss him when he's not there. So, hopefully he's back soon. And as Campagna quite rightly says, King will know exactly what it means to play for Rangers. Yeah, he absolutely does. It's an absolute learning experience for young Leon King, only 18 years of age at the moment. I don't think the plan was for him to play as many minutes as he has been doing at this stage. But it just is the sad reality at the moment for Rangers, where they are deprived of a number of players.
Just see on King, Derek, sorry to interrupt, but he's obviously it's a difficult circumstance to come into for an 18-year-old. As much as I thought he for a couple of the goals, naturally when you're going away to the form team in Europe, maybe the second one in particular, you could critique his positioning a bit, but I think also you have to give him a lot of credit for the way in which he is played. I think now in every Champions League game for Rangers in a lot of difficult situations. It's not his fault the current malaise he comes into. It's that most young players would not be thrown in at that level. So I just think that's probably worth mentioning as well. Must be quite difficult as an 18-year-old going into that environment. A lot more difficult than when last season, when you're coming on, when you're winning, or at the start of the season as well. Looked just like cramp. He played a lot of football, so hopefully he can continue to stay fresh. And Aberdeen's forward, I think I can't remember how you pronounce it, Maliovsky, and Duke up front. Looks good against Motherwell away. So, Rangers, it will not be the same type of game, I think, against Livingston, where it is quite an attack versus defence drill. The last time Jim Goodwin took his team to Ibrox was the end of last season, and it took a last 10 minutes goal from Roofe, wasn't it? Bit of a poacher's goal to keep what at that time was keep the title race alive. So I think it'll be a very difficult game.
Yeah, and if I'm not mistaken, his Aberdeen side had the lowest XG, or was it something like that, Joshua? And it was bettered the one when he brought his St Mirren side to Ibrox, where they offered next to nothing in an attacking sense. He'll look to sit in, I think, and just try and contain. It's not going to be easy on the eye. I don't think it's going to be pretty tomorrow, but I think 3 points is an absolute must for Rangers. as I mentioned earlier on, they can't afford to drop any more points in the race for the title, especially after last week. Okay, folks, I think that'll do us there. Thanks to everyone for getting in touch with the programme. Just a reminder, a little ticker below, we've got that fantastic offer on the website, just £1 for 2 months worth of content. Head over to rangersreview.co.uk/subscribe for all the details, and the link is in the title section as well on this video. Joshua will be at Ibrox tomorrow for us. There's a press conference this afternoon.
It's Johnny. Johnny's going to be there, Derek. He's
Wow.
he's out of the HQ again. Yeah, he's out of the HQ again. So, so he'll be there. He'll be doing the post-match TikTok and whatnot. But hopefully it's entertaining. I mean, it's not been great to watch recently, has it? So
no.
You want some entertainment, something to reward the fans. And yeah, hopefully a positive result.
Well, there you go. Johnny will be at the game for us tomorrow, folks. And as I mentioned, the press conference taking place this afternoon. So all the fallout from that will be on the site and our social media channel. So stay tuned for all of that. We'll be back. Johnny will be back tomorrow. But until then, enjoy the rest of your Friday.